Welcome to today's class. Today we will be talking about globalization and sustainability and how these topics correlate with language and education. Ultimately, in this lesson, I will put forward a thesis. The thesis is that we are currently finding ourselves in an impasse, and there are essentially four competing factions that are trying to shape the world of tomorrow. Two factions represent globalism and globalization, while two competing factions have a nationalistic agenda. Before we get to this, though, let's have a quick discussion of globalization and how it connects with sustainability, language, and education. It's often been said that arguing against globalization is akin to arguing against the laws of gravity. And it is true that globalization has been moving forward rapidly across the world with what has seemed to be an unstoppable force. Globalization is a process by which world cultures grow increasingly closer together in many aspects of life, sharing knowledge, technology, and energy across nation borders, and creating economic and political unions. Some of these unions have proven unstable. A great example is the European Union, which today is facing perhaps its biggest identity crisis since its inception. Due to the nature of globalization, everyone is affected by it, perhaps even those who do not wish to be. As globalization changes the ways of life for people in every nation, a big question is if globalization will bring with it an increased degree of sustainability. Education in particular is moving towards integrated curricula that emphasize the use and application of knowledge from multiple fields in order to solve real-world problems. Technology is playing a major role in the shift in communication towards faster and better means of transmitting messages, which in turn provide more context essential to intercultural exchanges. A unifying lingua franca to facilitate communication between people of different cultures is therefore a necessity in a global society, and English has, through sheer force, been the vehicle to promote such development. In 2022, we're seeing that the price of this is high, as there are clear signs of a pushback from nations not content with Anglo-Saxon dominance and perceived imperialism. We'll come back to that later. As for energy, there is increasing importance of the utilization of sustainable resources as a replacement for fossil fuels, and for making sure that they are available around the world. Sustainability, as it pertains to agriculture, puts emphasis on the implementation of practices that do not degrade the land or oceans used to provide crops, livestock, and fish. These problems affect the world as a whole because it has only finite resources, so global policies regulating these practices become paramount. Given the interconnections of the various aspects of society, moving towards a globally sustainable civilization seems both obvious and crucial. Without global cooperation, such sustainability is unlikely to be achieved. However, not every aspect of globalization is feasible or desirable. It is important to thoroughly explore each part of human culture that will be affected by globalization in order to fully understand its consequences. Only after careful evaluation is it possible to draw conclusions about globalization as a whole. Regardless of the manner in which globalization is defined, it is recognized that this progression toward a global society, which is becoming more and more evident in everyday life, is the result of a combination of economic, technological, socio-cultural, and political factors. So far, I have argued that globalization is inevitable, driven by communication, language, and the need to solve planet-scale problems while working towards a sustainable future. But now, it's time for me to tell you the ugly truth. The ugly truth is that however natural and logical this process may seem, it is likely that there lies a painful and complicated road ahead. There are several problems that must be solved before globalization can naturally resume its desired course. Here's why. Problem number 1. The two global agendas. There are two major factions, both touting globalization and globalism with distinctly different global agendas. One is benign, the other could turn out to be a cancer for generations to come. The benign seeks a natural interrelationship among regions, nations, and cultures for mutual benefit, to solve big issues and problems such as sustainability, energy, while benefiting from the exchange of knowledge and education cross borders. The other is a corporate, mercantile, elitist club. A club for the few. It envisions the elimination of the modern middle class and the constructions of a dystopian society, governed by a select few, in which global, programmable digital currencies will dictate consumption, taste, habits, indeed, our very lives. Problem number 2. The Anglo-Saxon pushback. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the collective West has acted as if by God's own will and desire, it had been given the moral high ground on every conceivable issue on planet Earth. The United States, with Europe close behind, have forcefully insisted on displaying geopolitical muscle, insulting many nations, Russia in particular. Innovation-driven Western economies have given almost unlimited power to the Western countries. Power to dictate, manipulate, to sanction, to punish, and to provoke regime change and similar whenever they see fit. Eventually, there would be a counter-reaction to this reality. Today, in what used to be Ukraine, we see this. You may have been told that the conflict in Ukraine is just about Russia illegally invading the sovereign nation of Ukraine. If you believe this, you have not been told the whole story. It is a terrible tale of broken promises, Western military expansion and armament, Ukrainian paramilitary groups, assaults on citizens, lack of democracy, corruption, and abuse of power. Although beyond the scope of this video, know that the conflict in Ukraine is a pivotal point in human history, in which certain countries, here under Russia, China, partly India, and several others, are drawing the line for a Western-driven vision of globalization. New reserve currencies will see the light of day. New alliances will be made. And the West will ultimately be forced to reevaluate its approach to nation-building and geopolitical power. Problem 3. The nationalistic agendas. As mentioned in the introduction, there are also two distinctly different nationalistic agendas at play. One seeks to reinstate some sort of predictable framework, a mild conservative version of going back to how things used to be. The other is strongly isolationist in nature, wishes none of what modern globalization could offer, and tries to stay entrenched in the past, refuses to embrace certain new ideas and concepts. Problem 4. The price of a green economy. The transition to a green and sustainable economy is paramount for the future of planet Earth. Equally important is the manner in which it takes place. It's the ultimate conundrum. Transition too slowly, and the price will be paid with unsurmountable damage to the planet, climate, and ecosystem. Transition too fast, economic repercussions will be so painful that entire nations will default, collapse, perhaps to never recover. The global economy is still very much entrenched in the energy of yesterday. Rushing the transition will likely provoke severe instability, suffering, and mass unemployment on a global scale. Also, the greener the economy, the more expensive the end product tends to be. The more expensive, the more poverty will be generated. Finding the right pace moving forward is the key. The fact is that English is the global language and the key to creating a global community. And this fact is causing friction around the world. This is the case as English today, by some, is yet again seen as the language of the oppressor, not the liberator. In many ways, it seems we've been here before. Multiple times, in fact. In the year 1900, the British Empire ruled supreme and were by far considered the most powerful economic and political entity on the planet. It seemed all but certain that England, through its tremendous strength, would push through its own vision of a new global order on the basis of its own set of values and beliefs. It was not meant to be. Only 14 years later, World War I broke out, forever changing the political landscape on the planet. Years later, the United States emerged victorious at the end of World War II, and from 1945 began to implement its own vision of a globalized world and a globalized economy. The pushback against Western ideology and its vision of a globalized world is in no small part due to the inability of Western nations to respect the viewpoints and realities of other sovereign nations. If globalization is ever to fully succeed, with the aim of benefiting humankind, educationally and culturally, while solving global issues such as energy, climate change, and sustainability, an all-inclusive and non-imperialistic path must be found. It's the only way forward.